Welcome, Mr. Andrey Woloshin, in our program. This is in a series about Europe between Americanization and Islamization. I'm very honored to be in your house and in your country, which is one of the most important countries of Europe, but rather relatively unknown in the European Union. And I know it is a very important, say, swing state. It can look to geopolitically to many directions, and it will be of extremely importance of the existence of Europe as a whole. What side your country will choose in the future. There are forces in your country looking to the European Union, like to be a member of it, or even further playing the American card, liking to be a kind of member of NATO, so in order to have a counterbalance against Russia. There are people also looking eastwards, making an axe with Azerbaijan or Turkey. Now, you are known to me as a very young but talented scholar of political science, and you're the initiator of the Ukrainian Traditionalist Club. Well, let us first dwell upon your views on Ukraine, its identity, and how you like to situate it in the geopolitical say, field of forces which I have depicted to you.
Yeah, Ukraine is surrounded by the myths. Example, one of the nowadays myths that Ukraine is split into two parts. The Western Ukraine, which is more pro-European, and the Eastern Ukraine, which is pro-Russian. Of course, there are some differences, cultural differences, even ideological differences, but we stand for one united Ukraine, and we have many friends both in the west of Ukraine and in the east of Ukraine, and it is the myth that all Eastern Ukraine speaks only Russian and is Russia oriented. And in fact this similar myth was that Kiev is Russian language and Russian culture city. In fact, now Kiev plays the role of national center and the center of revival, national revival, Ukrainian revival, and I also will add that I think it would be the center of all European revival. On the 14th of October, you've seen these large meetings and crowds. We celebrated the day of Ukrainian rebel army, the day of Ukrainian weapon, and the day of Ukrainian Cossacks as well. According to geopolitical situation, we Ukrainian traditionalists, patriots, we do not accept this idea that Ukraine should be a member of European Union. In fact, it is the political doctrine of nowadays government and the majority of parties which tend to European integration. But we do not think that is a good idea. We stand for European cooperation, cultural cooperation, maybe later political cooperation, but not in the way European Union goes now. As you know, European Union has large problems with the immigration, with also cultural identity, and with this so-called, they tend to call themselves democratical, but you see there is, and you confirm that in Ukraine there is much more freedom.
Not only more freedom, but I was so pleasant to see, I've been roaming around in Kiev, that I was really among Europeans, unlike in London or Berlin or in Amsterdam or our cities where we have been overwhelmed by rural Muslim people and their organizations become more and more powerful. And I'm here, in fact, out of fear. There's even many people who like to have Turkey as a member of European Union, and that will be disastrous to our ethnic and cultural identity. I rather would see myself Ukraine being within European Union. But as I understand from you now, you like to be as independent as possible, but since you are a traditionalist, and I think like me are in favor of a pan-European area where at least European culture and peoples can live at home, then what steps would you like to take in order to realize that? Are you first going for instance, for a pan-Slavian movement?
Yeah, well, we see Ukraine as a future regional leader, and Kiev must play the main role in integrational processes of the new union. I think it will be possible to start with the union of Slavic countries, Belarus and other countries in Eastern Europe, and then to spread it in more pan-European way. And also there are even historical background, historical reasons for Ukraine to be a leader, because Ukraine, it was proved by scientists, it is a homeland of Aryan Indo-European nations which came out from the territory of Ukraine. And now the situation in Western Europe is so ridiculous and kind of spoiled that we don't want to integrate and give up our independence, but it's better to create a new union on other principles, on traditional principles.
Yes, your country have been, for the centuries, I would say, a kind of anti-mural, a kind of defense against this Middle Asian, non-European peoples and identities, and I appreciate that so very much. Now, if you would say advocate a pan-Slavian, later on pan-European room, is it not then a little bit contradictory to the fact that you or many people I spoke to this weeks within nationalistic circles, they still like to delineate their identity with Russia, also that is also a Slavian and very important Slavian nation.
Yeah, but the situation with Russia and relations with Russia are kind of complicated, because Ukraine was a part of Russian Empire and in fact played a very important role, because all the Ukrainian elite of that time were also the elite of Russian Empire, and then for kind of 300 years together with Russia, and now it is understandable, because certain circles, they do not wish any kind of union with Russia, because they are afraid of this new domination of Russia and Moscow. And some of the Russian circles, they play, or so-called Russian circles, they play a role of the fifth column in Ukraine, and they like to destabilize the situation, and they shout about the discrimination of Russians, of Russian language. They think that Russian language must be a second state language, and that those whole idea of Ukrainian rebel army and the verification, the displacement of history issues. But we in fact, I think we would agree with the idea of Great Russia, but outside of Ukraine.
Yes.
Russia also has many problems, and internal problems and external. I like when I discuss things or speak with Russian imperialists, I say, you want the renewal of a strong and big Russian empire? Okay, start with Alaska.
Yes, but you see, some people will still say you play with a little bit in the American cards. We, as Europeans, in the European Union, we know we have been subjugated to United States by NATO, so to say, and United States is very much afraid of a united Europe upon European situation. They do everything to make tensions against Russia. And so, of course, states like Georgia, maybe Ukraine, with the Orange Revolutions, will have an ear to United States because they will think, oh, that is a nice friend in our struggle tensions with Moscow, imperialist Moscow. But in fact, it is also dividing the European northern peoples. And for instance, it is United States that is promoting the membership of NATO into European Union, and we have already 25 or 20 million Muslims in the European Union, and you can see it in the studies. What I like to say is this: Ukraine, being one of the main European countries, also with a dwindling population like ours, can play a pivotal role in the defense or an awakening of a European, a new European Europe. I do fully agree with you that we have to invent another structure of Europe than this European Union is. I fully agree there. But on the other hand, there are also people in your country looking the other way around. They like to say, oh, Russia is surrounding us with pipelines. So to avoid transit through Ukraine, they make these gas pipelines through Scandinavia, the North Stream and South Stream. And so what can we do? They rather listen to I think a very interesting geopolitical writer, this Mr. Juri Lipa, who already wrote say about he lived from 1900 to 1944, books like The Vision of Russia, Black Sea Doctrine. He wrote that Russia can get its resources from the Ural, but we as Ukraine should orient ourselves rather to the Kaukasus and with the aid of Azerbaijan and Turkey. So I'm afraid that if this concept of Panslavism will fail because of tensions with Russia, then your country will look to the east, and that will be a chance less for Europe to awake, in my idea. Do you follow my concepts?
Yeah, I am amazed that you know such thinker as Yuri Lipa, because his geopolitical works are mainly unknown for Ukrainians and even for Ukrainian political thinkers, political analysts, because they were recently published, but it's not so easy even to get his works. And also I would not call it like a pan-Slavic movement, because the Panslavism in its meaning it's very often understandable is promoted by Russia, by Moscow, and is in the meaning of the Russian domination, and that they treat Belarusians, Ukrainians like a part of Russian folk. Yeah, so the Panslavism, like a term, I do not like it much, but we need to have a strong union firstly in the Eastern Europe, and then to have the whole Europe as one big ally. And also I would like to say that and what you asked also.
No, yeah, we at least we fully agree that we have to go for strong, say, northern Europe, and we should try to keep out all the other cultures that they themselves organize them on an ethnical basis, like the billion of Chinese and this billion of Muslim people and so on. After two world wars of wars between European brothers, we are weakening ourselves. I was astonished to see that my country and NATO countries have been bombarding Europeans, Serbian people, and and that in fact, in order to create their two Muslim states, Kosovo and Bosnia, so that will happen if we are not going for a pan-European concept. Then others will move in and will divide us. And I repeat, I'm very pleased to hear from you that you do not consider Russians or Russian people as an enemy, but you are rather only because of your long history afraid of some imperialist features of the Moscow government.
We are not afraid. We are ready to resist it, and I also understand those Ukrainian nationalists who have a strong anti-Russian attitudes, because there were reasons for these attitudes. Several Russian organizations and even politicians, they tend to make make very bad replics towards Ukraine, and some of them even think about that Ukraine could still be with part of Russian renewed empire. But our conception is that Europeans should not fight with Europeans, and we are the minority in the world terms, because Europeans are less than 8% of the worldwide population, and the tendency that European families have usually not more than 2 children, and these tendencies are understandable. It's kind of also part of the culture, but other nations, other cultures may have even 10 children.
They proliferate, yes.
So we need to find new ways to at least to keep and remain our civilization, and I think we should look to the new technologies, and we must win not qualitatively, but not by quantity, but by the quality.
Yeah, that is nicely said. So, but we also have footless elites in our countries. They get as much as from our public resources as possible, and they send their money abroad, and maybe that is happening here as well. And while we need, of course, strong economies at least to resist to this outside world. And I know that, for instance, I saw these beautiful statues of yours, the mother of the motherland, and then the Ark of Friendship between Russia and Ukraine. They both are made of titanium, very beautiful, reminding us that I think 5% of titanium in the world is from your soil. And of course, then we must resist to these elites, these super-state elites that are roaming around in the world and take our wealth and bring it abroad. Can you tell me a little bit about the present-day political situation in Ukraine? Is this about your government and the opposition parties? Can you depict them a little bit for us?
Yeah, as you've said, our so-called elite is also footless, and now, several days before it was started the presidential campaign, the new presidential elections would be in January of 2010. But in fact, the situation is made of a kind of partocracy, and there are several parties, blocs, which are represented in Verkhovna Rada, Ukrainian parliament, and there is no way or no chances for new people, patriotic people, to come to power. Because to form a party it's necessary to have big financial resources.
Yeah, they exclude that. That's anywhere the same. They exclude the formation of new parties. So what do you have here? You have a footless elite. You have people who in a way collaborate with Russia, or the other way around. What are they doing there up with the present day economical situation, which the European Union is not very positive, but maybe you also have rather economic problems.
Ukraine suffers from this so-called financial crisis much more than European Union.
And what are the answers of the politicians? What do they propose?
They propose just different things, which are populist things, because now it is the time of presidential elections, and two main candidates, so-called Yanukovych and Tymoshenko, who is the prime minister now, they promise from their side to make everything better, to resist this crisis, to overcome it. But in fact, it's just the political campaign which started, and all Ukraine is full of these light boxes, and it's another very broad topic, the political campaign.
I have the impression that there are not real good propositions like in our countries. There's not good propositions from the politicians. It reminds me of the characterization by Mr. Solzhenitsyn of the new people coming at power in 1917, 1918 in Russia. He called them, I hope I pronounce it well, the Obrazovanchina, so kind of comprador elite, people with half intellectual gifts.
Now one of the mistakes is that there are only two choices, Tymoshenko or Yanukovych. In fact, there are a lot of choices, but the people masses, they tend to vote for the same party, looking from the personal sympathies, either to Tymoshenko, to Yanukovych, or to whatever politician. But now the situation is changing. From more and more people, they haven't decided for whom they will vote, and the percentage of those people who dislike all politicians is more than 20%. So in fact it is the niche for the right party, and it's their electorate, their voters, and there are several right parties in Ukraine, and probably after the presidential elections in half a year would be parliamentary elections, and we'll see how it goes. The most popular right party, Freedom Party, Svoboda, they won the elections in Chernobyl region. We had more than 30%, and now
30%. Oh.
Now their man is the leader of that region, and but they also they tend to more democratization.
But I understand, as far as I understand you say as a traditionalist, there are priorities to do. First, you have to build a stable, good identity of a people, and a culture, an identity. Then, if you can have solidarity among your people that are related ethnically and culturally, then you can solve maybe all these political problems, because if people don't feel related to each other, there will be what you call the system of blood, that is a system of favorism, and you have the system of Vivko, I don't know how to pronounce, but it is this uncle system, that you always have to have intermediate people. You never can buy a product immediately. So all kinds of what we would say corruptions can be dealt with as soon as people feels to belong to the same family, so to say, in the sense of Aristotle, saying you need a philia. Some people should feel related, and then only then you can, of course, develop a strong economy. So back to your the club, this Ukrainian traditionalist club. What, in fact, values do you like to promote or to safeguard, and what are the means by which you are doing that? Can you tell me?
Yeah, our values, our traditional values, is like blood and soil, or I would call it people and land, because without Ukrainian ethnical nation, not the political nation, because political nation is it's hard to imagine political nation. If the Ukrainian ethnical nation would disappear, there would not be Ukraine. And the same with land. Ukrainian territory, if it would be captured by others, the Ukraine would hardly exist. So that's why the two most important values are the people, the nation, the folk, and the land. Yeah, and according to our views, land must not be privatized and sold to everyone. And also, several of our goals of Ukrainian Traditionalist Club is to study Ukrainian traditionalists and European traditionalists, to make the cooperation between other European intellectuals, and then somehow influence the situation in the world.
Yes, if I might ask there, are there have been many nationalist writers and thinkers in the past. If I mention some names, maybe you can tell us a little bit about Mr. Taras Shevchenko or Mr. Nikolai Ryabchuk, the present day ideologist who is referring to a contradiction between, on the one hand, this narodnist people, this people for people's identity, and against this Russian cosmopolitanism. Can you at least tell us who are your sources of inspiration? Who are the writers of that you like your club visitors to know about?
Yes, Taras Shevchenko is the most famous Ukrainian poet, writer. In fact, he also was a painter, and of course we admire him. But the situation is, Shevchenko, he studied in schools, in universities. He is so popular, so that promoted popularity distantiates some people from him, from his personality, because
he's too much an icon.
The thing which is promoted, made an icon, it tends to be like a pop, art for the masses. But in fact, if to look more deeply, he had the amazing heritage, poetical, and also he had very difficult life and tragic life. And of course, we consider him as a very important person and thinker. But it was the 19th century. It would be very strange if we would tend to discuss and make our thoughts and our creativity based on Taras Shevchenko. It was 19th century, and
a newer, and a newer name than Dmitro Donson.
Yes, Dmitry Dontsov is ideological of Ukrainian integral nationalism. He also had very interesting Nietzscheanic conceptions, and he was a very deep thinker, and he tended to divide, example, literature towards heroic literature. He considered Shevchenko, Lesiu Ukrainku, and several more less known authors, and the literature of the slave soul. And to the literature of slave soul, he put this name on the majority of Ukrainian writers, which were democratical, pessimistic, wrote about kind of not so important things like just ordinary life, villages, and we appreciate them so, and his thoughts and ideas, they are kind of similar to our ideas.
So that was the right one I mentioned then, in a way. Are there present-day intellectuals you like to say have a relation with your club?
Also, we appreciate the works of Julius Evola, by the way, which are not translated to Ukrainian, but one of our meetings was, the name of it was Julius Evola, Heritage and the Perspective of Ukrainian Traditionalists. We consider Evola as a great thinker, and we really appreciate his ideas about for example, revolt against modern world, and
so in
also
a way,
the modern author whom we appreciate is Guillaume Faye.
You are attracted to his concept of archaeofuturism.
I don't know exactly what does he mean by this concept, but when I've heard, when I read the short brief definition of it, I understood that me and my friends, the thing we write and produce in art may be called archaeofuturistic, because we think and we are sure that society would remain to the traditional values, we remain with traditional values inside ourselves, but we see no point to stick to the stickness to the past and repeat the past masters and past deeds, and we tend to make it new, completely new styles. In example, we made, I've started new artist movement, ARFA, Archaeofuturistic Association. We make a music band which it would be completely different style, completely new style, and also my writings, which I read, I decided, I understood that they might be called archaeofuturism, and we appreciate this name, and we take this name like a new style.
I'm pleasantly amused by your ideas of new means, because it seems that you're very intellectual here. The peoples, they do read still a lot. They read poems, they write poems, they make music, while then when I think about youth in Western Europe, they are consumerists. They go to parties. If they have some nationalistic feelings, it is because the Muslims will take the beer away. It is that level of mind. And now here I see a very modern town, and I think we all Europeans would feel much at home here. But maybe it is not pleasant to hear, but is that just because of the good influence at the time of the Soviet Union? Because I know already in the Soviet time people tend to read and read much more than we have done here in Western Europe. Maybe it's your own, of course, your own source of civilization here, but you see, our youth is there all the time with the headphones on their heads, and they listen to the iPod, to Americanized music, and they are completely, even by education, cut off by expressions like poetry or belletterie. They don't do that even anymore. So I was pleased to see that the main people who are here in the streets demonstrating with their flags and are in the streets, they are the same who still are interested in this kind of verbal expressions, and this in itself is, I think, already a reason to incorporate Ukraine in our European awakening, because you are not yet as spoiled as we are by this, say, Hollywoodism, and so I am very glad to have met you in the person and the chaleureux way of receiving me here in your family, but also by the very kind and civilized way the Kiev the citizens of Kiev in fact can deal with all kinds of expressions of ideas without punishing them, without criminalizing them. If not for the language, I'm sure that I could here have many more discussions than are allowed to have in Berlin or in or Holland or wherever. Thank you very much so far for the interview, and I hope we will have another one soon, but then in the Russian language or the Ukrainian language or any Slavian languages, because they are also a family of the European languages. Unfortunately, only few people in Western Europe are at the moment learning these Slavian languages, which is a pity. But as a comfort to you, people like, say, in Holland, they even don't learn any more French or German. They all think they can speak English, which tends to Americanize them even more. Thank you very much so far.
Thank you too for the appreciation of Ukraine and Kiev. And it is also one of the goals of our Ukrainian Traditionalist Club is to invite such intellectuals like you.
Ja, dames en heren, we zijn nu in het hartje van Kiev. We zijn hier bij een demonstratie van Kozakken, dat is om hun nationale defensie te eren. We staan hier eigenlijk ook voor de Sofia-kerk. En hier is mijn gids. En dat is Andrey Woloshin. En die gaat mij zo even uitleggen wat hier te zien is. Wat een schitterende stad. Kijk, hij praat nu met zijn vriendinnetjes. Ik hoop dat het dus te verstaan is. Yes.
This is the prayer for Ukraine, because today is the day of Ukrainian rebel army and also the day of Ukrainian Cossacks and the church holiday Pokrova. And they pray for Ukraine.
Nou, dat is duidelijk en ik hoop dat we daar nog verder van kunnen genieten.